Okay. For the next 15 minutes or so, going to be talking to you about how to export your After Effects animations and whether you should use Adobe Media Encoder or the render queue. And this is particularly for beginners. If you're new starting with After Effects and you've noticed that there's, well, several different methods of export, you might be confused as to, why use one over the other and what benefits one over the other may have and what sort of cool things you can do inside of each of those, like saving presets or accessing presets or modifying template presets that you can reuse and share with others. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to switch my interface here. And I'm going to focus on this animation that a friend of mine, Mark Wolashuk, created for my Jace's Places Travelogue series. This was actually featured this past November at Adobe Max in San Diego. And I want to export out this animation. You can see that this animation in particular also requires alpha channel because this is going to be overlaid over top of video. So to do that, to export this, we're going to first go up to the, make sure you've got your comp selected. That's always a good idea. So this is Jace's Places C4D. Go up to the File menu here, and I can choose File, Export. And when I do that, right away you'll see that you're greeted with a series of different options. So the first thing here is to add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. So we're going to do that first, seeing as that's the first one in the menu. And if I were new to After Effects, that's probably the first place that I would go. So by selecting that, it's going to take that selected comp. If Media Encoder isn't already running, it will launch Media Encoder, and it will then place that into the Media Encoder queue. Now, I happen to have had Media Encoder running in the background already. So if I switch over there, now you can see that it has already set that Jace's Places C4D After Effects project ready to go. So you can send it to the Adobe Media Encoder. Now, one other thing that I want to point out too, the Media Encoder, which is now it's integrated into the export of all of the CC video apps. So from Premiere, obviously, After Effects, Audition as of last year's release, or that could have been the December release. I'm starting to forget now. Character Animator can go directly to Adobe Media Encoder. So this is integrated into everything. So it makes sense for consistency, if nothing else, to use the Media Encoder. Now, one of the really cool things is that if you've got a whole series of After Effects comps that you want to render, you actually don't have to have After Effects even running. Directly from within Media Encoder, if we go up to the top at the File menu here, you'll actually see that you have the ability to add After Effects compositions directly into the Media Encoder queue. Now that's one essential key of working with the Media Encoder, is that this is background rendering, which means that you are freed up to do other things. And based on your RAM preferences and how you want CC apps to handle RAM with your OS, you can allocate any number of gigabytes of RAM that you have in your system to the Media Encoder and leave enough free in the background so that you can work in After Effects or work in Premiere or work anywhere else. Let's go ahead and add an After Effects comp from the menu item. And you can see here, it's very simple, looks kind of like the dynamic link importer in Premiere or After Effects. And again, I could choose the same project. This is actually this one here called FB Live that I recreated for today. It connects to the dynamic link server. Makes sense, right? I can navigate to my comps, and you can see all the various comps that I have in that project, which subsequently are the same ones that you see in this comp folder again. So I could choose, let's say, the shape layers one and the pre-C comp one, and click OK. And now those get added to the queue as well. So now that you have all this in here, how do we deal with like formats? What do we want to go out as? Well, first of all, because I'm dealing with content that requires alpha channel, I'm limited to what I can actually export with. Now, the most common flavors that I always use and would recommend, ProRes 444. If you're on the Mac side, you can do it on the Windows side. It's a little more difficult, but there are third-party solutions for that. ProRes 444 has kind of been the standard for doing 16-bit content with alpha channel. You also have natively on both Mac and PC GoPro Cineform, which you can use, which will show up as 12-bit with alpha at maximum render quality. This one is great, it's beautiful. You can also use Apple Animation. That was kind of the standard for a long time. The only issue with Apple Animation is the playback performance it's just not very good. It's very heavy, it's an older codec. Animators, I'm sure, will tell you, many still use it. I'm not a full-time animator, but for me, especially for just like a logo or a lower third that requires alpha channel, it's just a bit heavy. And I wind up transcoding it to something else. So GoPro Cineform, ProRes 444, even JPEG 2000 can be used and can support the alpha channel. And in fact, I actually opened up a little a graphic for you here. Let me just pull this. I grabbed this from this is from Digital Rebellion. Now this is actually kind of old. This has been around for a while. So this is, again, from Digital Rebellion, digitalrebellion.com. You can go to their site. I think this was published like in 2008 or something like that. You'll see at the bottom here, I actually, I added GoPro Cineform and JPEG 2000 to the list. But this kind of gives you an overview of the various formats that you can theoretically use if you want to preserve alpha channel, okay? Now again, working in video, basically I'm dealing with ProRes 444, GoPro Cineform, and occasionally I'll do a JPEG 2000. Keep in mind, of course, you know, with alpha channel, these files are going to be big. So I see a lot online, hey, can you do H.264 with alpha? That would be so great. No, all right. They're going to be big, they're going to be a little bit heavy, but ProRes and GoPro Cineform should have very nice, smooth, particularly GoPro Cineform, playback performance on Mac or PC. All right, so now we want to choose sort of what formats we're going to deal with. So if I click on the twirl down menu here next to where it says QuickTime, this shows you all the same formats that you have in Media Encoder. And this, in and of itself, can be kind of daunting. And if you were to choose something like QuickTime, like I just recommended, and you go to this twirl down menu, you're going to see a couple of options. Like you'll see the GoPro Cineform. That is incidentally where you will find GoPro Cineform in our menu. It shows up under QuickTime. But you don't see all the presets here. Now, this is one of the things where I want to point out some of the sort of visual disadvantages of the Media Encoder, particularly if you're new, only because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Now, you'll notice down at the bottom, let me zoom up so you can see it, we've got the preset browser, and this is all broken down by sort of types, system preset types. So we have sort of broadcast presets, and you'll see right there, GoPro Cineform. So we could choose this GoPro Cineform 12-bit with alpha. This is the next one. This is the next one, at maximum bit depth. And we could use this preset at if we wanted. Again, you've got some, now that's JPEG 2000 MXFOP1A. The one I would recommend is via QuickTime. This too, though, this is a very long list. You might be thinking, well, I'm doing image sequences. So do I want to use that versus a video codec? It's not really broadcast. I love this panel, not knocking it at all. I think it's very well done. But if you're just doing sort of a basic animation, it can be a little intimidating. And also, it still doesn't give you access to change all the various parameters in a given preset. So let me show you how you do that from within Media Encoder. So we know that we want, let's say, QuickTime, but again, I didn't see a ProRes 444 in there. Now I'm on the Mac, I know it's here. So if you click where it says match, sort of whatever your chosen preset would be. Now we are in the export settings dialog. This is the same thing that you see if you do a Command M or choose File, Export Media from within Premiere. So now that I see that, again, up at the top here, we're working in QuickTime. Now I don't want to use that preset. I want to see all the various options that I have. So if I make sure that I'm in the Video tab here, under Video Codec, now this is where I can see everything, right? So if I need alpha channel, I'd use that ProRes 444. Or I could use GoPro Cineform right here. Or I could use JPEG 2000 right here, all right? So let's say I wanted ProRes 444, go ahead and choose that. Again, for bit depth, we want this to be maximum, so we'll set this at 64 or 32, which technically would create either a 16-bit or a 32-bit float file. 16 really is actually quite fine. We're going to render at maximum depth here. And once again, we can click OK. If we wanted to make additional changes to the audio, we could do that here. Again, all of our settings are here, so we can kind of see everything. And if you've done the sort of Premiere workflow, that's going to look familiar to you. And now it just shows up as custom here inside the Media Encoder. So at this point, I could say start the queue, right, up here with this green button. It's going to start rendering, and we can walk off and do other things, or we can work in other applications. So that's kind of the brilliance of Adobe Media Encoder, is that it's background rendering. However, sometimes you just want to stay in the app and do a quick render and then move on and actually wait. Or perhaps you want the flexibility of certain elements of like output template presets that you don't really have here or quite as elegantly here. So now let's go ahead and switch over. I'm going to go ahead and close the Media Encoder back to After Effects. Let's talk about the render queue now. So remember, that was the second one in our export list. So I could send this same comp and add it to the render queue. Let's go ahead and do that. Automatically pops up the render queue, which I've got docked down here. And you can see that it's now been added to the list. And then underneath you've got render settings and output module. But you'll notice that you've also got these drop downs here. Because one sort of really hidden, cool, awesome thing that we do in After Effects is that we allow you to create render settings templates and output module templates. The reason for that is, first of all, if you're doing a lot of animations, whether it's motion graphics elements or more sort of movie-styled visual graphics and things, you're probably going to use a lot of the same settings, both for the render itself and for the output, over and over again. To be honest, I think I started using After Effects some 15 years ago. I neglected to use any kind of template forever, and then I knew they were there, I just never thought to really click on them. And then once I did, I realized, okay, yeah, I'm going to use these a lot. So if you simply just click on these little drop downs, I'll zoom in here so you can see, you'll already see that there's a couple of presets made for you. So best is just that, and we'll go through what these things do and how you set them, etc. You'll see that we've got like DV settings. So clearly, a lot of these presets that are here already were made some time ago. Fully customizable. I invite you to make your own. We're going to make them in just a second. Again, you can see some of the others. This one here, my preferred best. This is really just a slight modification of the best settings here. All right. We have the ability to make a template. Now we will do that. Before we do that, however, let's just click on best settings. Because when you do this inside of After Effects, this kind of gives you a whole additional set of rendering options that you just don't see because they're not related to the Media Encoder. Media Encoder doesn't care about, well, how are we going to handle the solo switches? Or if there's, where is it, for frame blending or motion blur. Like this stuff is specific to the comp, which is why you save that as a render setting template, right? So for motion blur, yes, it's on for check layers. I want it to work that way. Time span, again, I typically only do work area, all right, when I'm doing renders here. Similarly, proxies, effects, solo switches, color depth. Again, I'm using current settings here, but you can also create a preset that guarantees, okay, 16-bit. Always export, work in 16-bit when you're doing this export. A lot of times I work in 8-bit here, so I'll set and create these render settings to render out at 16, all right? Again, resolution, you can choose here. Quality, best here. You get the idea. So you've got all of this additional stuff. Oh, and of course, frame rate here that you can set in some ways, but a lot of these things you don't have access to in Media Encoder because it just isn't related, all right? So now if we want to create one of these, there's two ways. You'll notice that down at the bottom, there's actually a make, I'm going to zoom up here, there's a make template option. You also, if the comp is selected, go up to the edit menu, templates, render settings, and output module. So like most Adobe applications, more than one way to perform a similar operation. So let's go ahead and create a template here for our render settings. So this is kind of showing you some of the defaults. We can call this FB Live Faves, all right? And this is currently showing you what's set for this given preset. So we can go ahead and edit this, and now we can say, all right, yeah, for color depth, again, always 16, solo, that's fine, no proxies, effects, again, all on, all off. Obviously, typically I'm going to go with current settings because I might change something along the way there. Field render, it's all progressive, don't need that. Motion blur, on for checked layers, off for all layers, current settings. So again, you can determine, let's do current settings for this one. Time span, maybe this will be a length of comp, all right? So we'll do this full length, use the comp's frame rate, that's good. Click OK, and we'll call this FB Live 16-bit full comp, click OK. And now when I go down to my render settings, click on my menu there, there's the preset that we just created, okay? Now, where this starts to get interesting, and this is the question that people pose and why I'm actually doing this, output module, the output settings. Let's go ahead and click on this. Now again, just like the other, this one actually has a couple of presets in here. Now you see I've already made one, ProRes 444 with alpha. It has a lossless with alpha preset. This one, again, based on probably when it was made, actually uses QuickTime animation. You saw in the chat, you heard me say it at the beginning, it's still legit, it's still widely used, it's just for playback performance with video. It's not so great for me, so I don't typically go that route. We have more options now. But that's just what that preset was built with. You can customize it. And you see there's some others, Photoshop sequence, QuickTime, a lot of this DV stuff really, it tells you how long these things have been in there, okay? TIFF sequences with alpha, you get the idea. So now, instead of going from the menu, let's go ahead and make the template here. Now this is where this gets really interesting. We'll call this FB Live. All right, and let's go, again, this kind of shows you what's already selected in here. All right, so let's go to Edit. And now this is where it gets very cool and very interesting, but also a little confusing for beginners, because when you go under Format, suddenly this list looks a bit different than the Media Encoder list. In fact, it seems to be missing some things, and I think it's got some other things that aren't even in there. Yes, indeed. So I actually did a little side-by-side for you. Look at this magnificent graphic that I created for you. So here's the render queue. Here's the Media Encoder. So yes, there's a whole bunch of options in the Media Encoder that aren't in the render queue, and vice versa. The reason for that is that some of these in particular, like this IFF sequence, SGI sequence, these are really related to animation, right? Motion graphics, other things. Media Encoder, again, if you're a Premiere user, you're not going to be using those formats. So I guess the thinking was it's really meant for animation. Leave it in After Effects. That's where people are going to go to do it. And that's legit, and that makes sense. So there's a difference, first and foremost, in the format that you're going to see here. All right, let's bounce back to After Effects. Okay, now, so for this one, let's say that we want this to be something like GoPro Cineform. So I'll stick with QuickTime here. Under Video Output, you'll see I have the options here. I want to do RGB plus alpha, all right? Or you can just do alpha or just RGB. We want RGB plus alpha. Depth, we're going to do millions of colors here. Color, you want this straight, unmatted, particularly because I'm dealing with some actual alpha channel material here. Go to Format Options. And now, just like you saw from within the export settings in Media Encoder, now we can see all the various codecs. So again, currently on ProRes 444. Let's go ahead and change this to GoPro Cineform. I'm going to set the quality all the way up. All right. Mindset Matador. Hey, Scotland, how are you? All right. Hi, David. All right. Let's go ahead and see you also have the option here, just like in Media Encoder, you can render the alpha channel only. Go ahead and click OK on that. All right, we can set any kind of cropping that we want here. We can set any scaling or resizing here. So again, this all gets set with that template, right? You might be working in 4K. All your stuff ultimately has to go out as, you know, GoPro Cineform, 12-bit with alpha at 1920 1080. So you can do all of that right here. You can build all of that and create that preset right here. Similarly with audio, you've got 8-bit, 16, and 32-bit float. You've got various format options here too. So you can really customize all this very, very easily. Click OK, and we'll call this FB. We'll call this instead, I'm actually going to save this one, GoPro Cine Full. Okay? And we'll click OK. Boom. And there it is. All right. And now you can actually see that we're using that preset. And again, it'll show up in our menu here. There it is right there. All right. Interesting that that one's showing up there and this is showing up here. I wonder why that is. Curious. Okay. So let's actually render this out while we're here. So now here is the fundamental difference between the two, right? So I want to render this out. So let's go ahead and render. Oh, and I'm going to make sure that this is going to my desktop. It is. And we'll call this 4. You can see I did a few others for you there. Whoops. All right. Go ahead and render this. Okay. And it starts rendering. And here's the thing. Oh, the render's already done. This is fairly quick. I only did a second. The thing is, this is a modal dialog. So when it's rendering, you can't access preferences. You can't really do anything. You can go and try and work in Premiere. The render queue is meant to be left here whilst rendering, okay? If you want to go and do other things, use the Adobe Media Encoder, which is queuing it and rendering in the background. This one is not background rendering, so that's really the fundamental difference. Now, one of the ultra cool things, too, with doing these output template presets, if we go up to Preferences, Sync Settings, and this is the same, by the way, for Media Encoder. It will respect presets that you create in the Media Encoder. Many people aren't aware of this, but under your Sync Settings, you'll see that Render Settings templates and Output Module Settings templates are part of your CC Sync. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're working on your work machine in your, in your post-production house studio, whatever, you're logged into Creative Cloud, all of your all of your presets, all of those things that you've got checked there will carry along. You'll have all that stuff with you on whatever workstation you're working on, Mac or PC, doesn't matter. Go back home, sign into CC, output template presets are there too, all right? So very easy, very cool, very flexible. So just to kind of show you a couple of different options in real time here, let's go ahead and open these up. So here's the one we just made, number 4, right? All right. And I've got a little overlay comp that I want to place this on top of. So let's go ahead and grab this, and you see, if you look up at the top here, it's going to tell you C40 number 4, it's a second long at 2997, trillions of colors, straight GoPro Cineform format. Okay, grab this, drop it in. You can even drop it in over top like that. All right, and there it is. All right, again, I only had a second of the logo there, but there's my logo with alpha channel done very, very quickly. Similarly, let's go ahead and pull in these other two just to kind of show you that these work as well. So here's the same thing, but this time done in ProRes 444. Again, show you the attributes up here. Let's grab this, drag it down into the timeline. Again, smoothly. All right, only a second here. I could actually put the ending right there if we wanted. All right. Makes it real nice and simple. All right, or let's grab this one here. So this one is JPEG 2000. So this one, let's see. It's okay. It was catching up. So my global performance cache is kicking in there too. So you see, that's how it does. That's how we do it. This is how we do it. And that's it. Media Encoder, Render Queue. Now you know you can use either or. There are different formats to consider. So again, if there's specific formats that you're not seeing in Media Encoder that you've been using in the past, surely they have SGI sequence or some of these other frame type sequences. Go into the After Effects Render Queue under Output Module. That's where you'll find those other formats. All right. So thank you again so much for joining me. Hope you learned something. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Again, remember to follow me at BeetleJace on Twitter. If you got any additional questions, I'll be sticking around in the chat. And my friends, we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.